Kabul, 2014. You grip the steering wheel of the Bushmaster, an armoured vehicle designed to protect against explosions. Your mission? Transport the VIPs to safety. Intel comes through the radio. Coalition forces were confronted on this exact route just hours earlier. You grip the wheel tighter. Time to move. You're still 5 kilometres from base and you don't know if the enemy has eyes on you. Contingency plans race through your mind as the 6-cylinder diesel engine rumbles under the bulletproof bonnet. Do you stay on course? It's your call. For a guy from the Central Coast who does up classic cars for a hobby, you ask yourself, how did I get here?
Alex Smith is a car enthusiast who grew up in Woy Woy in the Central Coast of New South Wales. In his spare time, he enjoys working on his classic Ford XB Falcon from 1975. He's also an Armoured Vehicle Crewman Sergeant in the Australian Army. We've just caught a glimpse into his mind during an intense force protection mission in Afghanistan in 2014 when Alex was just 19 years of age. I'm your host, Nick Musgrove. I'm a film and TV writer, and this is How Did I Get Here, a podcast about incredible stories in the ADF. So, how did the boy who used to ride his bike to school from a tiny beach town find himself carrying out VIP transport missions through a conflict zone in Afghanistan where just hours earlier, coalition forces were under fire? It's time to find out. Welcome, Alex.
G'day, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming in. So let's set the scene. It's 2014, you're 19 years of age, and you're behind the wheel of a serious piece of machinery. What are you driving?
So it's a Bushmaster. It's designed for personnel movement, armoured and in a way that protects it from the underside so that any explosions that happen, any improvised explosive devices, mines, stuff like that, all the crew and the personnel inside are protected.
Now, I, Alex, drive a Kia Sorento 3.5 litre V6, mostly school drop-offs. Could I expect a similarly zippy performance from a Caterpillar V6 under a Bushmaster hood?
They're basically the same thing. No, that's a joke. They're quite.
You had me there. I'm like, oh wow, I'm driving better than I thought.
So it's very much like driving a school bus, but lifted up so that it's got that good four-wheel drive off-road capability with a whole lot of storage down the side for equipment, weapons, food, stuff like that, everything that the crew needs. And then on the inside, just a row of seats down each side with padded flooring so that the floor is nice and soft so that any explosions that happen, the floor can't push up and hurt anyone. And then at the very front, 2 spots for some crew and a hatch right near the front as well so that you can access the weapon systems attached to the vehicle.
Talk to me about your crew that day. So how many in the crew for that particular mission?
So me and one other were operating the vehicle. So it was me and my commander at the time operating our remote weapon system. And then we did have in the back 8 personnel, making sure that our VIPs stayed safe. And they were operating things like weapon systems in the back so that they could see behind us and just being ready on the inside.
So Afghanistan 2014, what was the nature of your deployment there, Alex?
So it was multifaceted. We were doing multiple different things, whether that be help train the local forces, protect VIPs, and do security for certain events.
What does security look like? Like, how do you make things safe?
Ultimately, for us, it was mainly just providing that presence. Just being there was a deterrent in itself so that we could show that we're here to help and we're here to keep things safe as well.
Obviously, what you do and what you were doing in 2014 would require a really cool head. Was that your temperament growing up? Were you sort of a level-headed kid?
I think I was a very go-with-the-flow type kid. If something was happening, I'd just go with it and didn't need to fight against it. I just had to go with it most of the times.
And when did you discover your love of sort of mechanics and cars? Was that early in life?
My dad and his dad worked on cars together. My dad had a couple of cars in the garage, working on those and seeing how things just get to go together, and basically you get to play with a giant Lego set in your garage.
Clearly your love of all things mechanical knows no bounds, because in your spare time you're working on your pride and joy, which is your Ford Falcon XB.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And it's been a 13-year passion on working on that vehicle and getting it up to standard, and then different modifications to make it work even better.
So what do? Are you pulling it apart and putting it back together? What does working on a car actually entail?
When I first bought it, it didn't run. So using some of the skills that I'd learned from my dad, I was able to put the engine back together, order the parts I needed to, make sure everything worked, and then turn that key and get it running.
So for the rev heads out there, what is under the hood of a Falcon XB?
So the Falcon has a 351 Cleveland, which is like 5.8 litres of pure Australian muscle. 4-speed and a 9-inch diff. It's exactly what you'd want out of an Australian muscle car.
That might also outdo my Kia Sorento. I just have a sneaking suspicion.
Maybe just.
Alex, I'm really interested in the moment you decided to join the ADF. Your passions growing up were four-wheel driving, camping and shooting. How and when did you discover there was a job where you could actually do these things and get paid to do it?
Well, I was talking to some of my family and my uncle who served at the time, and they recommended going into the local recruiting centre. So I went in there, met them, spoke to some of the military staff about the different jobs, and then I found the job that you could work with vehicles where I could get some of that adventure and be hands-on, but get out and about and experience some of that.
Talk me through the initial training. Was it like you imagined, and were you nervous?
I was definitely nervous. I didn't know what was going to happen when I got off the bus on the other side, but I was ready for that challenge because I knew that it was going to be a challenge, and I was keen for that.
And what did the challenge look like when training commenced?
I wasn't really prepared for the fact that it was a challenge in myself having to think for myself and think for others and be a part of a bigger team. I think the physical challenge and stuff like that I enjoyed. I was ready to get out there, run around, lift some things. But that teamwork and the change of lifestyle from just being my own person to being a part of a team, that was a challenge, and I enjoyed it.
And now, after completing your basic training, Alex, you were posted to the School of Armour at Puckapunyal in Victoria. It sounds fascinating, the School of Armour. It's quite an evocative term for a civilian. What do you do there?
Very aptly named, as a lot of the schools are. We were there to learn our armoured skills, whether that be, at the time we were broken into two roles, being tanks, working with tanks, and then cavalry, which is the role that I went down. Now, that's where I spent the next 3 months learning all about armoured vehicles, starting with our dismounted skills, so on the ground, in a team, with a rifle, all sorts of different types of equipment, from anti-armour equipment, explosives, radios, everything we're going to need on the ground before we work our way up to using some of those higher tech communication systems that you can use in armoured vehicles because you don't have to carry them, which is nice. And then you go on to learn a lot of the driving and servicing, which I found a passion in that sort of area, learning how to drive 13, 14, all the way up to 70-tonne vehicles and working on them and keeping them moving out in the field environment when you're away from support, and then on to some of the weapon systems that are mounted on the vehicles, and then, off to do my job.
So there are really three main vehicles, as I understand it, that are used by the cavalry. Can you step me through those?
The three main ones that we use are the ASLAV, the Australian Light Armoured Vehicle, and that's going to be swapped out for a newer vehicle called the Boxer. That's a very similar vehicle, just with more armour and better systems and stuff like that.
And that's an 8-wheeler, is that right?
Yep, 8-wheel vehicle. The ASLAV can even float. It's got little propellers that can take it through the water so we can cross rivers and stuff like that. When it comes to cavalry, it's all about mobility and speed of mobility.
Now, how do you learn the limits of these vehicles? Like, in training, is that the place to understand where those limits are and how to operate safely within them, but at those limits?
Yeah, you're exactly right. What we teach at the School of Armour to our trainees is how to safely find the limit of what your vehicle can work up to, find it, and then not push past it, so that once they know where that limit is, and if they can push past it in a controlled environment, if they need to, where they can be safe, they know where that limit is, and then when it comes time, they'll know where they can push up to and how to use that.
Is it true that you get to learn how to drift?
Yeah, fairly true. We do have our what we call skid pan, basically a giant cement pad, big runway up to it, and we learn how to do emergency maneuvers, dodge things if we need to on the road or off the road, and ultimately find the limit with understeer and oversteer and drifting around corners and putting 13.5 ton sideways and maintaining it and safely coming out the other side. Feels good.
Clearly your level-headed nature makes you perfect for it. Did you ever need to use these sorts of manoeuvres on deployment in places like Afghanistan?
Afghanistan, yes, especially in Kabul when I got to go there for a few months, where it was snowing. A lot of the times the roads there, even though some of them were dirt, some of them were tar, black ice was something that I didn't really get to experience too much here in Australia, but having those skills of understeer, oversteer, when to just accelerate through and come out the other side, stay calm instead of slamming on the brakes and making it worse, was a definite valuable skill.
I've gone deep into this whole field in anticipation of our chat today, and I came across a term that I'd love for you to explain to me, vehicle husbandry.
So it's an integral part of all things armoured and most people that use vehicles throughout the ADF. It's where you create a connection between the crew, the operator, the driver, and the vehicle itself. It becomes a part of the team. Like in an ASLAV, we can have around 3 or 4 crew, and those people are attached to it, and they want it to come out the other side. They want it to be a part of the mission, and they look after it as such.
Let's talk about the ASLAV. So I'd love to picture what it's like inside one when you're in the, behind the wheel.
Yeah. At the front of the vehicle, there's the driver's hatch. So the driver sits inside the vehicle. There's no windscreen. There's only 3 little periscopes that are no bigger than a fist size each, so that you can see out and around. Now, that does take a bit of coordination between the driver and the commander on how to see around the vehicle. So it's a very teamwork orientated thing when it comes to vision. But the driver's nice and safe, big bus steering wheel, and the seat sits quite low in the vehicle. And then there's a little tunnel where we can keep our stuff, a little escape hatch for the driver to get in and out of the side. And that leads you to the turret, where we have 2 personnel in there, so someone gunning, so someone operating the weapon systems and the radios, and then the commander, which is my current position, usually standing so that they can look out of the vehicle, keep an eye on what the gunner's up to, give orders, and then we do have at times an operator in the back where we can keep people, store equipment, and hopefully stay self-sufficient with all that stuff for multiple days on end.
So as commander, you're almost the eyes for the driver. They obviously have some vision, but it's limited. What sort of things would you say, there's obviously a shorthand that would be essential to instructing a driver as to how to turn. Can you give me an example of how you would talk to a driver? Say you're coming up on a sharp turn.
Yeah, so coming up on a sharp turn, I can warn them about the turn coming up and give meters and how far they need to be looking ahead. And then ultimately, if I need them to change direction, it's going to be left hand down. That means bring the wheel directly around to the left, spin it left, and then right hand down, spinning it around to the right. And even if they can't see, they need to be able to trust that I can, and just take those orders and trust the system and trust the vehicle, that we can ultimately manoeuvre, even if they can't see where we're going.
I'd like to go back to the moment you received the news that you'd be deployed to Afghanistan. Do you remember that moment?
I do remember that moment. We're in an area called the Breezeway, like the sort of gathering place outside of our small little headquarters for the group of soldiers I was a part of. And there I was, just talking away with my friends and stuff like that because we were still fairly new to the unit, trying to remember people's names. And they came out and announced that we were deploying and that the list of names would be out that afternoon. And everyone was excited for that list to come out. They pinned it up on the wall, and a lot like a selection for a basketball game or a footy game or something like that. Selection happened, and there was my name alongside everyone else's.
And that might have been the first time you were away for Christmas, I'm guessing.
Yep. Yeah, I spent Christmas away, and it does snow in Afghanistan. I was walking around through the snow. I had my big puff jacket on so that I could keep nice and warm. Went into the mess, put my Santa hat on, and had a good meal with my friends. And I called my family, but I still had work to do.
Alex, we're going to return now to the day when you were carrying some VIP personnel somewhere in Kabul from secure location to another secure location, but along the way it was going to be really tricky. You've learnt that just hours before coalition forces took fire on the route that you have to take to get your VIP personnel to safety. Firstly, what's going through your head when you hear that this road ahead is potentially dangerous?
Mainly it was just about making sure that I did my part to make sure my friends and the mission stay safe.
So you're armed with some intel as to what had happened earlier in the day. How does that affect your planning as to how you will execute this mission?
Yeah, so we had some information about some of our allied forces and stuff like that had encountered some dangerous activities and get in a bit of trouble themselves, but we still had to keep everyone safe and get people from point A to point B, and we changed up our routes. We made sure that we did everything that we could to keep everyone safe and make sure that we got there.
Was there a moment where you thought, right, this could be the day where there's contact and things get a little hairy?
I definitely looked around and made sure that everything was as it was supposed to be. You can tell when things get a little bit off, and we were trained to look for that. When you look around a crowd and when you look around down a street, there's certain signs that absence of the normal and the presence of the abnormal. So like going past a market or something like that where there should be people going about their business and suddenly there isn't, that's a key indicator that people are deliberately avoiding the area. And that can mean that they're just trying to keep themselves safe, but that'll show us that there's something unsafe there. Or people that are in the wrong spot, people that are just loitering in the wrong place. People don't usually hang out there. That's a key indicator that they're not meant to be there.
So you're looking out for these things on the day of the mission. How's the heart rate when you jump into the Bushmaster? Are you behind the wheel or are you the commander that day?
At that time I was behind the wheel, so very focused on what was ahead while taking in as much information as possible. Heart rate was high but steady.
And what sort of terrain were you having to traverse for this particular mission?
So it varied from close terrain where there's markets and buildings right over the road to open terrain where there isn't a building to see for hundreds and hundreds of metres.
So you had your plan and you'd prepared well and you knew that you might do things slightly differently to keep yourself a little safer? Yeah,
not making patterns, so not going to the same place repeatedly, so that no one knows where you're going to be at any one time, having a varied speed so that people can't keep up with you even if they did want to try and follow you or target you. Yeah, so safety can sometimes come from just by changing your plan a little bit, staying that little bit unpredictable, because people can't ambush you, people can't find you if they have no idea where you're going to be. And all we have to do, if the mission is get from point A to point B safely, we have multiple options on different routes to take and when to take that turn, different speeds to go at, so that people ultimately won't know when or where we're going to be, and that helps to create or not create patterns.
I see. So that's all part of the pre-mission plan as well, I presume. You map out how you're going to do things differently?
Yeah, so we'll know that this is the common route, this is the main way to get from A to B. Nothing stopping you from using it, but these are all the alternate routes, and we'll use a different route to try and mix it up and change it up so we're not on that common one all the time. And then having a plan B as well. So there's going on a different route, and then if we need to and someone tells us that we've got some information that route's not safe anymore, we can quickly change because we've already prepared for a different route.
I suppose it's difficult to ever know, but do you think that planning was the difference?
I think our planning was a big difference in the way we operate as Australians. We put a lot of effort into making sure that the plan goes ahead, and then when it doesn't, because most plans rarely survive that step off as soon as you step off on the mission. Most plans rarely survive that, so you've got to have that plan B and have it ready in your mind so that you know that when you're told to take on that plan B or even plan C, that you're ready. You've got it in your mind, ready to go, and you can just go off and do that as well.
Did plan Bs and Cs come into action on the day you were transporting those VIPs?
Yeah, actually, we did have to change routes and take different pathways a couple of times so that we knew that it had changed enough to stay that little bit unpredictable. And we even did things like increase our speed so that even if someone could catch up to us, they wouldn't be able to have the time to do anything.
When you say catch up to you, I'm now picturing potentially another vehicle that could be part of the threat. Is that correct?
Yeah, vehicles, people waiting in strategic locations for us, and for example, if they're waiting for us to ambush us, if we're moving too quickly, we can move through and through that ambush position before they can even enact their plan.
Was there an opportunity to interact much with the local population in Kabul?
Yeah, there was a couple of chances where I got to be out there on the ground, meet people. The kids are always very interested to come up and say hi, and I was lucky enough to chat to a few of them, and I was just happy to hand things out like we all did, so handing out things like candy and stuff like that to keep people happy, to know we're there to help, and the odd American dollar here and there helps, so I handed one to a kid and off they ran, and I had no idea that they were running off to go get something. I thought they were just happy. They came back with a whole bunch of local bread and handed it out between us, and happy to be there and enjoy that together.
Beautiful. So you gave a kid $1 just to have, and surprisingly he came back, and quite beautifully came back with bread to share with you and some locals?
Yeah. Obviously happy to have an American dollar and run around and be happy about it, but he felt like he had to bring something back and do that trade and show that we're not just there to take, they were there to share as well.
So there was a chance to quite literally sort of break bread with some of the locals. Did you get to talking with them?
Yeah, using what phrases I could, and they can actually speak quite good English. A lot of American TV helps with that. So they were actually quite good at having a chat with us and just making sure they're having a good day. It's a chance to show your face, to show that you are just a person behind the uniform. Good chance to show that we were there ultimately to help people.
So Alex, it's been 13 extraordinary years since you embarked upon your unique career in the ADF. Looking back, what words of wisdom do you think you would pass on to your younger self?
So I guess the younger me, I've said it a couple of times, he was just keen to go with the flow. If I was to give myself advice, it would be with those challenges that you took on, find more, go for more. It's okay to shoot for the stars. Even if you don't make it, you've at least gone up multiple levels, getting closer and closer to that. You find yourself out in orbit when you're shooting for the stars.
Alex, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you everyone for listening. To learn more about careers in the ADF, head to the link in the episode description and join us again soon for more incredible stories on How Did I Get Here?